खबरां दा लेखा जोखा अप्रैल 25/2025 आप सब तक पहुंचा रहे ने लिकर 62 घर दे विच कोई वडेरा समागम है, ब्याह है, शादी है जां वड्डी पार्टी है और वड्डी वनगी ते वडेरी मात्रा दे विच हर प्रकार दी शराब लिकर ते वाइन ते बीयर खरीदण दे लई जरूर पधारो 6285 किंग जॉर्ज बुलेवार्ड ते पैंदे लिकर 62 ते।
Mistrial declared in former World Junior Hockey players' sex assault case. A mistrial has been declared in the sexual assault case involving 5 former World Junior Hockey players. The trial had begun on Wednesday, but jurors were dismissed early after the judge said something had come up that she needed to discuss with the lawyers. The jurors were called back on Friday and a mistrial was declared. The ruling means a new trial will be held for Michael McLeod, Carter Hart, Alex Formanton, Dylan Dube, and Callan Foote, who all pleaded not guilty to sexual assault. McLeod has also pleaded not guilty to an additional charge of being a party to the offense of sexual assault. Jury selection will begin Friday in the new trial. The charges relate to an alleged incident that occurred in London, Ontario hotel room in June of 2018. The dismissal of the jury happened after brief testimony from a detective with London police who was beginning to discuss the layout of Jack's bar. This is where the complainant met Michael McLeod, one of the 5 players on trial, before going back to hotel room in the city in June 2018. According to the Crown's opening submission on Wednesday, McLeod allegedly invited several teammates to his room where a number of sexual acts occurred involving the complainant over the course of a few hours. Each of the 5 accused players is alleged to have had sexual contact with the woman without her voluntarily agreeing to those specific acts. Friday's declaration of a mistrial came as a shock to one criminal lawyer in Vancouver. Michael Shapray says the start of the trial had been highly anticipated, and as the reason for the mistrial is under a publication ban, there will be a lot of speculation as to what happened. The judge will have to determine the timeline of what happens next. It may be that they immediately look to get a new jury, but that's not so easy, because picking a new jury requires you to bring panels of people into the courthouse and then pick a jury, and that jury has got to be available for the trial. So I don't know that they would have a panel of jurors just sitting on the sidelines, Shapray said. I think right away there is going to be a delay until they can find a pool of people that they can pick a jury from. I don't know how long it's going to be, because there's so many people's calendars and schedules that are going to have to be accommodated. Shapray says cases of mistrial are not common, calling them a pretty drastic remedy. It's basically saying that the trial cannot continue. Something has occurred in the course of the trial that means that this case has to go off the rails completely and cannot complete and has to be restarted again, he explained. As for the victims in the case, Shapray says that it's already an incredibly stressful time as one gears up to testify in a trial before the mistrial decision came down. I'm sure it's going to be difficult to sort of grasp that there may be a delay in all of the mental preparation to get on the witness stand is going to have to be redone essentially at another time, he said. The trial was expected to last about 8 weeks. A date for the new trial has not yet been released.
लंडन ओंटारियो विखे 2018 ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੋਏ ਸੈਕਸ਼ੂਅਲ ਅਸੌਲਟ ਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਟ੍ਰਾਇਲ ਸੀ ਉਹ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਹੀ ਜੂਰੀ ਦੀ ਸਿਲੈਕਸ਼ਨ ਤੋਂ ਉਪਰੰਤ ਪਹਿਲੇ ਦਿਨ ਹੀ ਮਿਸ ਟ੍ਰਾਇਲ ਆ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਡਿਕਲੇਅਰ ਕਰ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਗਿਆ ਔਰ ਯਾਦ ਰਹੇ ਇਹ 5 ਜੂਨੀਅਰ ਵਰਲਡ ਹਾਕੀ ਪਲੇਅਰਸ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਇੱਕ ਔਰਤ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਸੈਕਸ਼ੂਅਲ ਅਸੌਲਟ ਦੇ ਕਾਰਨ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕੇਸ ਹੈ ਜਿਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ 5 ਪਲੇਅਰਸ ਨੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਆਪ ਨੂੰ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਨੌਨ ਗਿਲਟੀ ਕਰਾਰ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਹੈ ਔਰ ਇਸ ਦੇ ਮਿਸ ਟ੍ਰਾਇਲ ਹੋਣ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕਾਰਨ ਕੀ ਹੈ ਉਸ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਨਸ਼ਰ ਕਰਨ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਬੰਦਿਸ਼ ਹੈ और एक बात का यह भी कहना है कि इस तरह कदे हुंदा नहीं और बहुत ज़्यादा कदे कदाई हुंदा, पर इस ट्रायल को दोबारा शुरू करने लई जिहड़ी प्रक्रिया लंबीरा समा चाहिए। सब तो वड्डी गल उसने दर्शाई कि किस प्रकार जिहड़े ज्यूरर्स ने उन्हां नूं लभना ही सब तो वड्डी जिहड़ा मसला खड़ा हो जाता है और अगला जिहड़ा ट्रायल है वो कदों होएगा इस बारे अजे कुछ भी नहीं कहा जा रहा।
Canadians put off by Trump's bluster and border arrest are booking far fewer U.S. visits. Diane and Rick Bellany initially planned to take a Caribbean cruise out of Houston before heading to Laurel, Mississippi to visit the home of one of their favorite HGTV shows' hometown. The Calgary couple scrapped those plans and vacationed last month along Mexico's Pacific coast instead, put off by U.S. President Donald Trump's trade war with Canada, the insults he's hurled at their homeland, and stories about American border agents searching people's phones and detaining foreigners for minor reasons. She found it ironic that she felt more comfortable traveling to Mexico than the U.S. "I never thought I would ever hear myself say that," Diana Bellany said. Trump's attacks on Canada's economy and threats to make it the 51st state have infuriated Canadians who are canceling trips to the U.S. in big numbers. They also seem to have flipped the narrative heading into Canada's parliamentary elections on Monday, with Prime Minister Mark Carney's Liberal Party surging after trailing far behind in the polls just a few months ago. The U.S. gets more visitors from Canada each year than from any other country, according to the U.S. Travel Association, an industry trade group which said the 20.4 million visits from Canada last year generated $20.5 billion in spending. But there has been a big drop in foreigners traveling to the U.S. since Trump took office, and Canadians are no exception. There are more than 910,000 fewer land border crossings from Canada into the U.S. last month than in March of 2024, a more than 22% drop according to U.S. Customs and Border Protection data. An Air Canada spokesman, meanwhile, said Canada-U.S. flight bookings for April through September are down about 10%. Trump brushed aside the decline in tourism to the United States on Wednesday, saying there's a little nationalism there. I guess perhaps it's not a big deal. Since Trump started his second term, there have been well-publicized reports of tourists being stopped at U.S. border crossings and held for weeks at immigration detention facilities before being allowed to fly home at their own expense. On March 3rd, Canadian Jasmine Mooney, an actor and entrepreneur on a U.S. work visa, was detained by U.S. border agents in San Diego. She was released after 12 days detention. Before Mooney's release, British Columbia Premier David Eby expressed concern, saying it certainly reinforces anxiety that many Canadians have about our relationship with the U.S. right now and the unpredictability of this administration and its actions. The Canadian Association of University Teachers, representing staff at Canadian universities, warned its members against non-essential travel to the U.S. due to the political landscape under Trump and reports of Canadians encountering difficulties crossing the border. Academics who have expressed negative views about the Trump administration should be particularly cautious about traveling to the U.S., said the group. People are scared to cross the border. I don't know what Americans are thinking, quite frankly. Are they that obvious, said former Quebec Premier Jean Charest, who has family in Florida. Mike Sower, who runs a community policing center in Vancouver, said he and his partner have no interest in traveling to the U.S. because of Trump's politics and border fears. One of Sower's concern is that if a border guard were to check his cell phone, the guard might see his past purchases of marijuana, which is legal to buy in Canada and about half the 50 states, but is still illegal under U.S. federal law. The states have a different view on drugs. They could certainly look at my phone and see I'm 420 friendly, he said, meaning he's marijuana friendly. I think it's kind of depends on which border guard could have a problem with that and which ones wouldn't. Deidre Wilson, 32, said when she was younger, she often visited Detroit, which is just across the border from Windsor, Ontario, where she and her husband Ben own a second-hand shop. She hasn't visited much in recent years, though she said she's heard of people's worries about crossing the border since Trump moved back into the White House. It's worrisome, she said. Ben Wilson, 37, also has qualms about trying to cross. Why would I want to? He said, regardless of the tariffs, if I'm going to be stopped at the border for my phone or somebody texted me, why go? The drop in Canadian tourism to the U.S.-led California Governor Gavin Newsom, a frequent target of Trump to announce an ad campaign this month, meant to lure Canadians back to his state, citing a 12% year-on-year drop in February. Mackenzie Macmillan, a consultant with a Vancouver-based travel agency, the travel group said the company's bookings to the U.S. have dried up. We have seen a near total collapse of U.S. business, he said, probably about a 90% drop since February. Leslie Cater, the CEO and founder of the Travel Lady agency in Calgary, said she's seen people actually forfeit money to cancel their U.S. trips. Even if they're going on a Caribbean cruise, they don't want to go down to Fort Lauderdale to get on the cruise ship, she said.
ਮੌਜੂਦਾ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਹਾਲਾਤ ਨੇ ਦੋਵੇਂ ਮੁਲਕਾਂ ਦੇ ਦਰਮਿਆਨ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਤੇ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਦੇ ਦਰਮਿਆਨ ਉਸ ਦੇ ਮੁਤਲਕ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਨਜ਼ਰੀਏ ਜ਼ਾਹਰ ਕੀਤੇ ਨੇ ਉੱਥੇ ਨਾਲ ਦੀ ਨਾਲ ਅੰਕੜੇ ਨੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਉਹ ਵੀ ਜ਼ਾਹਰ ਹੋਏ ਨੇ ਕਿ ਕਿਸ ਪ੍ਰਕਾਰ ਜੋ ਪ੍ਰੈਜ਼ੈਂਟ ਟਾਈਮ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਚੱਲ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਲਾਤ ਨੇ ਦੋਨਾਂ ਮੁਲਕਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਟ੍ਰੇਡ ਦੇ ਸੰਬੰਧ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਉਸ ਦੇ ਕਾਰਨ ਲੋਕ ਨੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਉਹ ਆਪਣੇ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਨੂੰ ਜਾਣ ਦੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਪਲਾਨਸ ਨੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਵੱਡੀਆਂ ਤਬਦੀਲੀਆਂ ਲੈ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ ਔਰ ਪਿਛਲੇ ਮਹੀਨੇ ਬਾਰਡਰ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਤਕਰੀਬਨ 9,10,000 ਘੱਟ ਲੋਕ ਨੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਵਾਲੇ ਪਾਸੇ ਨੂੰ ਬਾਰਡਰ ਕ੍ਰਾਸ ਕੀਤਾ ਔਰ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕਿ ਔਸਤਨ ਡਾਟਾ ਦੇ ਮੁਤਾਬਕ 20% ਹੈ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਉਹ ਕਮੀ ਹੈ ਔਰ ਜਦ ਰਹੇ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਤੇ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਦਰਮਿਆਨ ਚੱਲ ਰਹੇ ਇਹ ਤਰਕ ਵਿਤਰਕ ਦੇ ਕਾਰਨ ਜਦੋਂ ਤੋਂ ਰਾਸ਼ਟਰਪਤੀ ਟਰੰਪ ਨੇ ਰਾਸ਼ਟਰਪਤੀ ਭਵਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਪਹੁੰਚੇ ਨੇ ਉਦੋਂ ਤੋਂ ਇਹ ਕਾਰਗੁਜ਼ਾਰੀਆਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਵਡੇਰੀ ਮਾਤਰਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਫਰਕ ਆਇਆ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਨਿਰਸੰਦੇਹ ਆਪਣੇ ਹੀ ਮੁਲਕ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਾਂ ਫਿਰ ਮੈਕਸੀਕੋ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਛੁੱਟੀਆਂ ਮਨਾਉਣ ਦੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਧਾਰਨਾ ਉਹ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਵੱਧ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ ਔਰ ਜਦੋਂ ਇਸ ਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਰਾਸ਼ਟਰਪਤੀ ਤੋਂ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ ਗਿਆ ਤਾਂ ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਵੀ ਹਾਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਥੋੜ੍ਹੀ ਬਹੁਤ ਦੇਸ਼ ਭਗਤੀ ਦੀ ਭਾਵਨਾ ਜਾਗੀ ਹੈ ਪਰ ਇਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਕੋਈ ਬਹੁਤਾ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਫਰਕ ਹੈ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਉਹ ਨਹੀਂ ਪੈਂਦਾ ਪਰ ਬੇਅੰਤ ਲੋਕ ਹਨ ਔਰ ਇਸ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਨਾਲ ਟਰੈਵਲ ਇੰਡਸਟਰੀ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਸੰਬੰਧਿਤ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਵਪਾਰ ਨੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਵੀ ਇਸ ਗੱਲ ਨੂੰ ਪੁਖਤਾ ਕੀਤਾ ਕਿ ਕਿਸ ਪ੍ਰਕਾਰ ਅਪ੍ਰੈਲ ਤੋਂ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਸਤੰਬਰ ਤੱਕ ਦੀਆਂ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਦੇ ਲਈ ਉਡਾਣਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਬੁਕਿੰਗਸ ਨੇ ਉਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਵੀ ਕਿੰਨੀ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਵੱਡੀ ਕਟੌਤੀ ਆਈ ਹੈ।
Nainamo family seeks answers as 8-year-old son remains medically excluded from school. The family of an autistic boy in Nainamo is looking for a path to get their son back into his school, claiming they are being given few options and even fewer answers. Andrea McDonald says her 8-year-old son, Luther, has been medically excluded from his program for more than 60 days. We have no idea how to get him back despite the multiple emails and meetings and appeals of asking what is the clear pathway to get him back to school, and no one can tell us. Luther, who is non-verbal, usually attends a life skills program at Georgia Avenue Community School, but in February, McDonald states that she and the family were told he could no longer attend. A letter from the school district told the family there were repeated episodes of level 3 behavior, which the district describes as endangering the health and well-being of staff and students. Today, he had an escalation of more than 40 minutes where he bit his EA through clothing, breaking skin and leaving a significant bruise. There are also property damaged in the school hallway, the letter dated February 26 stated. In recent weeks, after level 3 behaviors have included targeted throwing, pursuing, lunging at specific staff, biting, hair pulling, pinching, kicking, property destruction, and self-injurious behaviors such as hitting his head on the wall of glass, it continued. Pursuant to my obligations, the letter is to inform you that I am excluding Luther from a school until a certificate is obtained from the school medical officer or a private medical practitioner permitting his return, the letter ended. According to McDonald, one of those incidents related to property damage was when Luther ripped posters off a wall. His class is filled with kids with all the same behaviors, but yet he's the one sitting at home while they are at school, she added. McDonald says the family was told that Luther could return to class if the district received a medical certificate or letter from a private practitioner determining him fit to return. She adds that they got 2 letters from Luther's medical care team, but were then then told by the district that they weren't sufficient. It's now been more than 60 days of trying to get him back into class. The letters provided to the school district, which has been stated that Luther's medical condition has resolved. One letter says that while Luther's behaviors can escalate when his medical condition worsens, this letter is to state that his illness is currently stable and his parents are well connected and accessing his medical team to manage his illness. School is a vital part of a child's life and we hope to see him return since he is feeling better. The other letter from a pediatric at BC Children's Hospital stated McDonald shares that she and her husband are also not being invited to district meetings about Luther's case. She says Luther cares providers, including his pediatric team and social worker, were invited to a meeting last week, but not them. You'd think if they had an interest in collaborating, they would involve the parents, she explained. McDonald says the exclusion from school is having a major impact on Luther's, including becoming depressed. He's so bored, he's climbing the walls. A kid should be at school and not sitting at home. It's definitely affecting him for sure. In a statement to the media, Nanaimo Ladysmith Public Schools Executive Director Gillian Robinson says Luther's case is a very complicated situation. Robinson confirms that Luther is under exclusion under Section 95 of the School Act. The Act states if a teacher, principal, vice principal, or director of instruction suspects that a student is suffering from communicable disease or other physical, mental, or emotional condition that would endanger the health or welfare of the other student, the teacher, the principal, the vice principal, or the director of instruction must report the matter to the school medical officer, to the school principal, and by the superintendent of schools for the district, and may be excluded the student from school until a certificate is obtained for the student from the school medical officer, a private medical practitioner, or a private nurse practitioner permitting the student to return to school. Robinson clarified that a medical certificate is different than a doctor's note or letter. McDonald says the district is giving the family mixed messages. The district stated they wanted and would conduct a functional behavioral assessment last week for him to attend a few days of school, she explained. We were told last week that it was cancelled and they no longer needed this assessment and they have enough data to have a meeting instead. They are not saying they need a behavioral assessment and one hasn't been done and he can return without one with a medical certificate, she said. McDonald says the family is at a loss as to what to do next. I don't know what our options are at this point, she said. We are going to have to probably seek legal counsel because they are not communicating with us at all.
ਨਨਾਇਮੋ ਦੇ ਸਕੂਲ ਦੇ ਇੱਕ ਵਿਦਿਆਰਥੀ ਹੈ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਉਸ ਨੂੰ ਸਕੂਲ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਕੱਢ ਕੇ ਘਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਰਹਿਣ ਦੇ ਮਤਲਬ ਉਸਦੇ ਮਾਪਿਆਂ ਨੇ ਗੁਹਾਰ ਲਗਾਈ ਹੈ। ਬੱਚੇ ਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਵਰਤਾਵ ਦੇ ਸੰਬੰਧ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸ਼ਿਕਾਇਤ ਆ ਉਹ ਦਰਜ ਹੋਣ ਤੋਂ ਉਪਰੰਤ ਉਸ ਨੂੰ ਸਕੂਲ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਬਾਹਰ ਰਹਿਣ ਦੀਆਂ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਹਦਾਇਤਾਂ ਸਨ ਉਹ ਦਿੱਤੀਆਂ ਗਈਆਂ ਸਨ ਔਰ ਵਰਸ਼ ਦੇ ਸਕੂਲ ਆਉਣ ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਮੈਡੀਕਲ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸਰਟੀਫਿਕੇਟ ਹੈ ਉਸ ਦੀ ਪ੍ਰਾਪਤੀ ਹੋਣੀ ਜ਼ਰੂਰੀ ਹੈ। ਔਰ ਇਸ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਮਾਪਿਆਂ ਦਾ ਇਹ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਕਿ ਬੱਚੇ ਨੂੰ ਸਕੂਲ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਾਣਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ, ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸਕੂਲ ਡਿਸਟ੍ਰਿਕਟ ਹੈ ਜਾਂ ਸਕੂਲ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਕਿਸੇ ਵੀ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦਾ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਜਵਾਬ ਨਹੀਂ ਦੇ ਰਿਹਾ, ਉੱਥੋਂ ਨਾਲ ਦੀ ਨਾਲ ਸਕੂਲ ਦੇ ਕਾਇਦੇ ਕਾਨੂੰਨ ਦੇ ਮੁਤਾਬਕ ਸਕੂਲ ਵਾਲਿਆਂ ਨੇ ਵੀ ਆਪਣਾ ਸਪਸ਼ਟੀਕਰਨ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸਕੂਲ ਡਿਸਟ੍ਰਿਕਟ ਨੇ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਕਿ ਅਗਰ ਕੋਈ ਵੀ ਬੱਚਾ ਆਪਣੇ ਵਰਤਾਵ ਕਰਕੇ ਦੂਸਰਿਆਂ ਦੇ ਲਈ ਖਤਰਾ ਪੈਦਾ ਕਰਦਾ ਜਾਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਲਈ ਖਤਰਾ ਪੈਦਾ ਕਰਦਾ ਤਾਂ ਉਸ ਨੂੰ ਸਕੂਲ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਹਰ ਘਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਰੱਖਿਆ ਜਾਣਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ। ਔਰ ਮਾਪਿਆਂ ਦਾ ਹੁਣ ਇਹ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਕਿ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਕਿਸੇ ਵੀ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਹੈ ਉਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸ਼ਾਮਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾ ਰਿਹਾ, ਇਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਮਜਬੂਰਨ ਹੋ ਸਕਦਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਕਾਨੂੰਨੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸਲਾਹ ਉਹ ਲੈਣ ਦੀ ਜ਼ਰੂਰਤ ਪਵੇ।
BC opening 10 involuntary care beds for mentally ill men in custody. The provincial government says it's opening 10 involuntary treatment beds in a BC pre-trial facility for men in the criminal justice system struggling with serious mental health and addiction issues. By having this facility within the pre-trial center, it gives us the opportunity to intervene to ensure that they are stabilized and supported, and for those who can't be stabilized, that they get the additional care that they need, said Premier David Eby, speaking outside the facility in Surrey. The update comes after the provincial government announced in September last year that it would be opening secure facilities to provide involuntary care under the Mental Health Act for those with severe addictions who are mentally ill. At the time, advocates compared forced involuntary care to jail as the province confirmed that some of the beds made available would be at correctional facilities, including the Surrey Pre-Trial Centre. Speaking Thursday, EB said it would be a mistake to see these beds as being somehow disconnected from what's happening in this community, describing the potential patients as the population that people are anxious about. What this does is to create a possibility for us to intervene in that cycle of community, criminal offense, jail community, criminal offense, jail, over and over again. The intervene is potentially to stabilize and get them into support in the community, or if they can be stabilized here, to get them into those more intensive care situations that they need to somewhere else. BC's Chief Scientific Advisor for Psychiatric, Toxic Drugs and Concurrent Disorders, Dr. Daniel Vigo, said until now patients in custody had to wait in seclusion for weeks for space at a forensic hospital. Our patients will now receive the level of psychiatric care they need the moment they need it. This will result in the prevention of harms resulting from weeks of untreated agitation and psychosis. It will result in the implementation of a care plan sustained throughout their time in corrections and integrated with services in the community, Vigo explained. EB says he knows why some in BC are critical of involuntary care, acknowledging the province's history of residential schools, forced treatment, sterilization, and more. He says the pre-trial facility will not repeat history. For the vast majority of people that are struggling with addiction, this has absolutely nothing to do with you, said EB. It's for a very small cohort of people who are struggling in a very visible, serious, and public way, where their own safety is compromised as well as the safety of the broader community. They are very targeted beds and they are very stringent safeguards in terms of how they are used. For example, for this population here, these are people who are already in custody. All their liberty has already been taken away. They are in jail and we are providing additional care on release. They are either going to a facility where they get care that they need, or they are stabilized and connected with care in the community so that they are interrupting the cycle of offending. The province says the unit is open and fully staffed, with one internal patient being assessed for admittance and 4 others from outside the Surrey Pre-Trial Centre being assessed as well.
सूबा सरकार ने जिकल सरी दे विच ऐलानामे कीते ने कि ਉਹ ਲੋਕ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਿ ਮਾਨਸਿਕ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਦੁਸ਼ਵਾਰੀਆਂ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਨਸ਼ੇ ਦੀ ਦੁਰਵਰਤੋਂ ਕਰਨ ਵਾਲੀਆਂ ਅਲਾਮਤਾਂ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਜੂਝ ਰਹੇ ਆ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਲਈ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਐਕਸਟਰਾ ਬੈਡਸ ਨੇ ਅਰੇਂਜ ਕੀਤੇ ਗਏ ਨੇ ਤਾਂ ਕਿ ਕਿਸੇ ਵੀ ਪ੍ਰਕਾਰ ਦੀ ਕਾਨੂੰਨੀ ਕਾਰਵਾਈ ਦੀ ਇੰਤਜ਼ਾਰ ਕਰਦੇ ਹੋਏ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਇੱਥੇ ਸੁਵਿਧਾ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਦਿੱਤੀ ਜਾ ਸਕੇ। ਔਰ ਕੰਟਰੋਲਡ এনवायरमेंट ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਮਾਨਸਿਕ ਮੈਂਟਲ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮਸ ਨੇ, ਉੱਥੇ ਨਾਲ ਦੀ ਨਾਲ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਹੱਦ ਤੋਂ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਨਸ਼ੇ ਤੇ ਮਰੀਜ਼ ਹੋਣ ਦੇ ਕਾਰਨ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਦੇਖਭਾਲ ਆ ਉਹ ਕੀਤੀ ਜਾ ਸਕੇ। ਔਰ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਜਾ ਰਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਇਸ ਦੇ ਪਿੱਛੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਮਕਸਦ ਹੈ, ਖਾਸ ਤੌਰ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਬੈਡਸ ਐਕਸਟਰਾ ਅਰੇਂਜ ਕੀਤੇ ਗਏ ਨੇ, ਇਸ ਦਾ ਵਾਅਦਾ ਪਿਛਲੇ ਸਾਲ ਕੀਤਾ ਗਿਆ ਸੀ ਔਰ ਪ੍ਰੀ ਟ੍ਰਾਇਲ ਸੈਂਟਰਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਵੀ ਕੁਝ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਥਾਵਾਂ ਨੇ ਇਹ ਸੁਰੱਖਿਅਤ ਰਹਿਣਗੀਆਂ।
Crisis and promise, how each federal party plans to fix housing in Canada. The sight of a mass and socially distant prospective home buyers lining up around the block to view a reasonably priced condo may feel like a distant memory dating back to pandemic times. It was a poignant image representing the state of housing in Canada's big cities, where even homes needing some serious repairs were the subject of aggressive biddings wars well above asking price. And while those times may feel long gone, the words housing and crisis remain interlinked in Canada still today, as they have been for over a decade. Take-home prices in some of Canada's biggest cities, for instance. Last year in Toronto, the average price of a house was more than $1.2 million, with the monthly mortgage payment on an average home amounting to 79% of the median monthly income, according to the Housing Affordability Monitor published by National Bank. In Vancouver, the annual household income needed to afford a condo was over $177,000, while the median household after tax income was just under $90,000. And according to a 2023 study released by Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation, 3.5 million homes need to be built by 2030 to meet the needs of a growing population and economy. All that has made housing and affordability key issues for Canadians during this election. Here's a roundup of how political parties have been responding to voters' housing concerns. The Liberal platform promises to build 500,000 of homes every year by investing $25 billion, including $10 billion towards homes for students, seniors, veterans, people with disabilities, and indigenous housing, shelters, and more. In addition to funding and tax incentives, the Liberals want to act as a developer by creating a new agency called Build Canada Homes. There's also an emphasis on using technologies like prefabricated homes to build environmentally sustainable houses at scale, with the hopes the demand of building materials would stimulate over industries like manufacturing and forestry. The party also promises several measures to reduce approval timelines for new projects. The Conservatives say they would build 2.3 million homes largely through a GST holiday on new home purchases under $1.3 million, as well as by lowering local taxes by compensating municipalities. The private sector would be allowed to defer tax on capital gains for their investments in housing. The Conservatives believe these tax incentives will lower the cost of houses by $100,000 while bringing in billions of dollars in investment. Another proposal by the Conservative is to turn 15% of federal buildings and lands into housing within the first 100 days if they form the next government. They also propose simplifying the National Building Code. The NDP hopes to double the pace of home building by adding 3 million homes by 2030 through a $16 billion investment in a national housing strategy. This includes rewards for cities under the Canadian Homes Transfer for building apartments and townhomes to make up 20% non-market housing in every neighborhood. A part of this investment would also go towards the community's first fund to help provinces build public infrastructure like water and transit. The parties envision a very different role for CMHC, the Federal Crown Corporation that provides mortgage liquidity and acts as an insurer, while the Conservatives characterize it as a bureaucratic body that's slowing home building. Polyev is promising to restrict CMHC. The NDP says it would use the agency to offer low-cost mortgages to Canadians. The Greens want CMHC to focus on constructing non-market housing and building a prefabricated housing plant to lower cost of construction, in addition to low-cost mortgages. The People's Party of Canada would like to privatize or dismantle the agency, blaming it for fueling the housing crisis. The Green Party says it would create the biggest public housing construction program since the 1970s to build 1.2 million affordable non-market homes. On its platform, the Bloc Québécois says it would demand all housing-related investments to be transferred to the Quebec government, calling housing a provincial jurisdiction, but it said it would work to increase non-market housing to 20%, a promise has made by the NDP. The Bloc also called for elimination of GST for first-time home buyers on new home purchases and other associated services like notary, building inspector fee, and more. All parties agree housing has been beyond the reach for many Canadians due to doubling of home prices in the past decade. However, when it comes to why the prices have risen so much, their explanations and solutions vary. The NDP and the Green Party blame the big corporations for buying up properties and for increasing rents and renovations. In cities like Vancouver and Toronto, investors own more than 30% of all condos. Regular families who need homes can compete, the Green Party platform reads. Both parties are calling for a ban of preventing corporations and entities like private equity and real estate income trust for buying rental properties and social housing units. They also call for the elimination of tax benefits and public loan access to such corporate entities. The Green also calls for banning corporations from buying single-family homes. In 2022, the Liberal government under Justin Trudeau banned foreign nationals from buying residential properties, but it only applied to individuals and not corporations. The ban is set to expire in 2027. The Bloc Québécois is calling for curbing real estate flipping by increasing the minimum ownership time of housing to 2 years before an investor can benefit from capital gains exemptions on profits from house sales. In contrast to those different restrictions on private corporations, the Liberals and the Conservatives hope their measures would spur billions of dollars of private investment in housing. It should also be noted that Liberal leader Mark Carney came under attacks during the debate for his role as the chairman of Brookfield Asset Management before his entry into politics. Its parent company, Brookfield Corporation, has over $1 trillion in real estate and energy infrastructure assets. One of its subsidiaries are one of the Canada's largest residential property owners with over 30,000 homes in 2024. The PPC blames mass immigration under Liberal governments led by Trudeau for the increase in home prices and called for a moratorium on new permanent residents admitted for as many years as necessary until the housing crisis has cooled down. It also said it would work with provinces to curb speculation and money laundering by foreign non-residential buyers in real estate. Carney says his government would keep the lower immigration targets set by the Liberals last year, adding we need to build our capacity. The New Democrats promised to build 100,000 rent-controlled units on current federal lands by 2035 and fund affordable housing projects by non-profit developers, cooperatives and indigenous communities. The platform outlines it will link local governments' access to the federal Communities First Fund to implementing rent control and tenant protection measures, a dubbed Renters' Bill of Rights. The bloc says it will demand federal financing for Quebec's initiatives to student housing to cool the rental and residential housing demands. The Conservatives have criticized the Liberal government over rental increase for military personnel in April of 2024. They promised to cancel the rent hike and to build 6,000 units in military bases. Neither the Liberals nor the Conservatives made explicit promises regarding tenant rights and relief measures for rentals. The Green Party called for transfer of federal to indigenous housing organizations in line with self-determination principles. The NDP's platform said it would finance housing projects led by indigenous communities through with a community housing bank. The Liberal Party would provide $10 billion in low-cost financing for builders of affordable housing projects targeting indigenous communities, among others. In 2019, the federal government set a target of reducing homelessness by 50% by 2027 through its Reaching Home project. The Parliamentary Budget Office estimated in 2024 that an additional $3.5 billion funding would be needed to hit that target. The bloc says it will demand unconditional funding for Quebec's strategy in dealing with homelessness. The Conservative platform says it will end 10 cities by criminalizing setting up of temporary structures and by giving the police powers to dismantle encampments. It also said it would follow a housing-first approach to end homelessness without providing any details. Jagmeet Singh's NDP would create a program to help 50,000 people in critical need of housing and boost existing community-based programs to help people experiencing with chronic homelessness. The Greens also call for increased investments for youth shelters and transitional housing to support youth at risk of homelessness. The NDP promised to double the Canada disability benefits, and the Green says they would strengthen it. The Green also promised to introduce a guaranteed livable income program, whereas the Liberals said the NDP say they would increase the existing guaranteed income supplement, which provides financial assistance to low-income pensioners. The Liberals say they would work with provinces and territories to set homeless reduction targets and support community-level efforts to end encampments, even though the Liberal government had set a goal of halving homelessness back in 2019.
ਮੌਜੂਦਾ ਚੋਣਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਖਾਸ ਤੌਰ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਹਾਊਸਿੰਗ ਅਫੋਰਡੇਬਿਲਟੀ ਵਾਲਾ ਮੁੱਦਾ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਉਹ ਵੱਡੇ ਕ੍ਰਾਈਸਿਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਗੁਜ਼ਰ ਰਿਹਾ, ਇਸੇ ਕਰਕੇ ਰਾਜਨੀਤਿਕ ਪਾਰਟੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਇਸ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਪਬਲਿਕ ਨੂੰ ਆਗਾਮੀ ਸਮਿਆਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੀ ਦੇ ਸਕਣਗੀਆਂ ਉਸ ਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਚੰਗੀ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਵਿਸਤਾਰਪੂਰਵਕ ਦੱਸਿਆ। ਔਰ ਜਿਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਿ ਲਿਬਰਲ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਨੇ ਆਪਣਾ ਅਕੀਦਾ ਦੱਸਦੇ ਹੋਏ ਮਿਲੀਅਨਸ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਘਰ ਨੇ ਬਣਾਉਣ ਦੀ 2030 ਤੱਕ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਜਿਹਦੀ ਪੇਸ਼ਕਸ਼ ਸਾਹਮਣੇ ਦਿੱਤੀ ਹੈ, ਉਸ ਦੇ ਪਿੱਛੇ ਕਾਰਨ ਨੇ ਵੱਡੇ ਕਿ ਤਕਰੀਬਨ ਕਿਸੇ ਵੀ ਔਸਤਨ ਘਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ 79% ਜਿਹੜੀ ਇਨਕਮ ਆ ਉਹ ਸਿਰ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਛੱਤ ਰੱਖਣ ਦੇ ਮੁਤਲਕ ਹੀ ਖਰਚ ਹੋ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਹੈ। ਇਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਹਾਊਸਿੰਗ ਅਫੋਰਡੇਬਿਲਟੀ ਹੈ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਇੱਕ ਵੱਡਾ ਮੁੱਦਾ ਬਣਿਆ ਹੋਇਆ ਹੈ, ਜਿਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਿ ਜਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਟੋਰਾਂਟੋ ਦੇ ਏਰੀਏ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ $1.2 ਮਿਲੀਅਨ ਹੈ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਘੱਟ ਤੋਂ ਘੱਟ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਕੀਮਤ ਆ ਉਹ ਘਰ ਦੀ ਰੱਖੀ ਗਈ, ਔਰ ਇੱਕ ਪਰਿਵਾਰ ਜਿਹੜਾ 1,77,000 ਦੇ ਕਰੀਬ ਬਣਾਉਂਦਾ ਹੈ, ਉਹ ਇੱਕ ਸ਼ਹਿਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਵੈਨਕੂਵਰ ਵਰਗੇ ਸ਼ਹਿਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇੱਕ ਅਪਾਰਟਮੈਂਟ ਹੈ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਉਸ ਦੇ ਲਈ ਹੀ ਕੁਆਲੀਫਾਈ ਕਰਦਾ ਹੈ। ਔਰ ਇਸ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਲਿਬਰਲ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਨੇ ਆਪਣਾ ਅਕੀਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਦਸਾਇਆ, ਉੱਥੇ ਕੰਜ਼ਰਵੇਟਿਵ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਨੇ ਆਪਣਾ ਖੁਲਾਸਾ ਕੀਤਾ ਕਿ $1.3 ਮਿਲੀਅਨ ਦੀ ਕੀਮਤ ਵਾਲੇ ਘਰ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ GST ਹੈ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਉਸ ਦੀ ਛੋਟ ਦੇਣਗੇ ਪਹਿਲੀ ਵਾਰ ਘਰ ਖਰੀਦਣ ਵਾਲਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ। ਔਰ NDP ਵਾਲਿਆਂ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਇਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇ ਹਾਲਾਤਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਘੱਟ ਇਨਕਮ ਦੇ ਵਾਲੇ ਲੋਕ ਰੈਂਟ ਦੇ ਕੰਟਰੋਲ ਵਾਲੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਘਰ ਨੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਤਰਜੀਹ ਦੇਣਗੇ। ਔਰ ਗ੍ਰੀਨ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਦਾ ਇਹ ਵੀ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਬਣਾਏ ਜਾਣ ਵਾਲੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਘਰ ਦੀ ਰਿਹਾਇਸ਼ੀ ਘਰ ਨੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਤਰਜੀਹ ਦੇਣਗੇ। ਸੋ ਹਾਊਸਿੰਗ ਅਫੋਰਡੇਬਿਲਟੀ ਹੈ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਇਸ ਚੋਣਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਾਫੀ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਵੱਡਾ ਸਬੱਬ ਬਣਿਆ ਹੋਇਆ ਹੈ।
Poilievre campaigning in conservative safe ridings as election nears. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is campaigning in what polls suggest are conservative safe ridings today as election day approaches. Poilievre is set to begin his day in Saskatoon, where he will hold a press conference before holding a rally in Nanu's Bay, BC in the evening. Recent polls suggest the ridings in both Saskatoon and Nanaimo area, which includes Nanu's Bay, are leaning conservative. Liberal leader Mark Carney has a busy day in Ontario, beginning with a press conference and visiting a small business in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario. He is later set to participate in the virtual Assembly of First Nations Forum, meet with community members in Georgetown, hold a meet and greet in Cambridge, and hold a rally in London. Polls suggest that most ridings in Ontario are leaning Liberal, though 2 ridings in the London area and the riding of Sault Ste. Marie, Algoma, are leaning Conservative. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh will be campaigning in Liberal-leaning ridings in Toronto, Hamilton and London today. The Liberals are widely seen to be leading in the polls, with the Conservatives in second place and the Bloc cubicles, NDP and Greens trailing behind. Canadians will choose their next government on Monday.
ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੀਆਂ ਫੈਡਰਲ ਇਲੈਕਸ਼ਨ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਕਿ ਸੋਮਵਾਰ ਨੂੰ ਹੋਣ ਜਾ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ, ਉਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਲੀਡਰ ਨੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਇਸ ਵਕਤ ਪੂਰਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਮੁਲਕ ਉਸ ਦਾ ਦੌਰਾ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ। ਔਰ ਕੰਜ਼ਰਵੇਟਿਵ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਦੇ ਮੁਖੀ ਪੋਲੀਵੀਅਰ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਨੇ ਉਹ ਕੰਜ਼ਰਵੇਟਿਵ ਦੇ ਸਮਰਥਕ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਰਾਈਡਿੰਗਸ ਨੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਦੌਰਾ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ, ਜਦੋਂ ਕਿ ਅੱਜ ਸ਼ਾਮ ਨੂੰ BC ਦੇ ਨਨਾਈਮੋ ਵਾਲੇ ਏਰੀਏ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਪਹੁੰਚਣਗੇ। ਔਰ ਮਾਰਕ ਕਾਰਨੀ ਨੇ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾਤਰ ਅੱਜ ਦਾ ਦੌਰਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈ ਉਸ ਦਾ ontario ਤੋਂ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਹੈ। ontario ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾਤਰ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੀ ਪਸੰਦਗੀ ਆ ਉਹ ਲਿਬਰਲ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਵੱਲ ਮੁਖਾਤਬ ਹੋ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ, ਪਰ 2 ਰਾਈਡਿੰਗ ਨੇ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਿ ਕੰਜ਼ਰਵੇਟਿਵ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਹੈ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਕਾਫੀ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਪਸੰਦ ਕੀਤੀ ਜਾ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ। ਬਾਕੀ NDP ਪਾਰਟੀ ਹੈ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਉਸਦੇ ਮੁਖੀ ਜਗਮੀਤ ਸਿੰਘ ਇਸ ਅੱਜ ਤਕਰੀਬਨ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਤੋਂ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾਤਰ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਲਿਬਰਲ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਦੇ ਵੱਲ ਨੂੰ ਜਾਣ ਵਾਲੀਆਂ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਰਾਈਡਿੰग्स ਨੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਦੌਰਾ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ।
इसी के साथ हमें दीजिएगा इजाजत। खबरों दा लेखा जोखा के इस सेगमेंट से जिसे आप तक पहुंचा रहे थे लेकर 62। घर पे कोई पार्टीज वगैरह हो रही है, गैदरिंग्स हो रहे हैं, लोग इकट्ठे हो रहे हैं, फ्रेंड्स मिलने के लिए आ रहे हैं, इट्स गोना बी वीकेंड, सो लिकर की ज़रूरत है, शादी ब्याह है या कोई पार्टी है, एनिवर्सरी है या फिर हल्ला गुल्ला है, लिकर की ज़रूरत है। बेस्ट एंड डिस्काउंटेड लिकर आपको 6285 किंग जॉर्ज बॉलीवार्ड से मिल सकता है। लिकर 62।